We recently put out a video where we talked about the importance of defining success and deciding how to measure it before starting the event planning process, but we weren't able to get into as much detail as we would have liked there. Because while sometimes it's pretty straightforward, if you're planning a fundraiser, success should probably look like raising a certain amount of money. Sometimes your goals are more abstract and don't seem to be accompanied by obvious, easy to measure metrics. For example, what if success for you means creating more alignment within your organization? Or educating attendees about your organization's mission, or even just making sure guests have a great time? How exactly do you measure those things? Sure, you could send out a post-event survey and ask attendees directly, do you have a better understanding of our mission? Did you have a great time? But you'd be lucky to get a dozen responses back. So, in this video, we're going to talk about the ways we try and measure event success when hard data isn't really an option. If you can't observe a thing itself, the best approach is usually to try and measure things you can observe that reliably point towards the thing you really care about, to come up with proxies for your goals. To explain what I mean, let's look at those examples from earlier. Let's say you're organizing a company retreat or a corporate workshop and you want to create more alignment within your organization. You tell us, your event planner, that you want employees to walk away feeling less siloed with a greater understanding of their shared goals. Since that goal itself isn't something that we can easily measure, the first thing we'll ask ourselves is what sort of effects we would expect to see if that goal had been met, and whether any of those are measurable. So what would be the effects of greater organizational alignment? Well, when everyone's already on the same page, you usually don't need to spend as much time explaining specific details during meetings. So maybe you'd expect to see fewer clarifying questions asked during those meetings. And greater alignment usually also means internal teams don't need to spend as much time going back and forth while working on shared projects. So maybe you'd expect to see those projects completed on shorter timelines. In trying to determine whether your workshop created greater organizational alignment, our metrics might actually end up being the number of clarifying questions people ask during meetings and the time in which cross-departmental projects are completed. As far as metrics go, they're not perfect, no proxy will be, but they're much better than flying blind. Let's walk through a couple more examples just to further illustrate the point. Let's say you're a nonprofit and your goal is educating attendees about your organization's mission. What sort of effects would you expect to see if that goal had been met? Well, the more people understand something, the more likely they are to care about it. So maybe you'd expect to see a spike in first-time donations, or volunteers, or just more traffic to your website. These proxies could, of course, also be coupled with more direct data collection too, like surveys and anecdotal evidence from your actual conversations with attendees to help you get an even clearer picture of your success. And finally, let's say your goal is just making sure your guests have a great time. What sort of effects would we expect to see if that goal had been met? Well, if guests are having a great time, most of them are probably going to stay for the entire duration of the event, so you could try and measure how many people leave early versus how many stay through to the end. And if they're having a great time, most are probably going to try and come back next year, so you could also measure the number of attendees who return year over year. More than any specific metric, we just want to give you an understanding of our process, so that when you're faced with abstract goals, you can still find a way to try and measure them. If you want help planning an event or coming up with ways to measure your more abstract event goals, reach out to our team at the link below.